Good morning. Hi everyone, it's Stacy. This is Walking in My Shoes and we are loving my veteran this morning. Hope everybody is trying to stay warm through this weird Mother Nature thing. And I've got to have some more coffee as we go through our morning. Give everybody a second to kind of get here. So today's topic is finishing, and we're working on building loving, lasting relationships. Um, and that is key, is in our loving, lasting relationships, we have to be able to communicate. And that's something we're going to talk about today, in how we do that, how we build that loving, lasting relationship through communication. We talked a little bit yesterday about that when we communicate, we have to be able to protect us and communicate what our needs are, and that we're still talking about protecting our bubbles. So we have to be able to, as we do this, communicate now to our veteran in a way that works, that is loving and that is lasting, and that fits all of the criteria, like respect and trust and with love and with integrity. And we have a hard time sometimes, because let's be real, when we go through this journey that we're on, a lot of times there isn't a lot of there isn't a lot of love and trust that comes back, or we don't feel it. So it's very hard for us sometimes to be able to communicate that on the other way. So we're going to talk about how these skills come into play, and how you can, from my experience, again, I can't talk about anybody else's, how we can remember the anatomy of how their minds work as they were trained to be a warfighter, and communicate those things effectively. So those are just some of the things we need to really get into. So when we're talking to our veteran, obviously this is a key factor. Remember that they have some real issues that come from their training and that come from their PTSD. One of the biggest ones is they are mission driven. Being mission driven, they were given a task and they were told, this is your objective 1 and 2 to finish your task, sometimes 3. Good morning, Sunny, Sophia, good morning. So those are some of the things that they have. Also, when they come home and they've had issues that are against their moral grain, they sometimes feel broken, less worthy, not deserving of love sometimes. So we keep all that in perspective when we are talking to them, to open up these lines of communication. Now I understand I've read it, I've heard it, I've seen it, and it is, well, they don't do it to me. Again, we'll go back to the car scenario. You're standing out in the yard. Do you have the keys? No. Do you have the keys? You can stand there and argue about who has the keys all day long, but till somebody makes that move to go get the keys, you're not going anywhere. So when we're talking about making our relationships loving and lasting and healthy, somebody has to make that first move. And if we are in this protecting ourself mode, in our bubble, that is, we're creating our own bubble of happiness, and we have our boundaries set in our bubble, then we have to learn to communicate in a way that we're protecting our bubble, but we're also respecting their bubble. Now, they may not know they have a bubble yet, and that's okay. We didn't know we had a bubble either. I didn't know a year ago I had a bubble. I do now. So when we act a certain way, it will help them build their bubble and their boundaries. So one of the first things that is very key to this is that mission driven. When you have something you want to say to your veteran, it needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, It needs to not be sugar coated because they get caught up in the sugar coating. And it needs to be no more than 2 or 3 objectives. So when you go in and you're starting this conversation, honey, because we want to sugarcoat things, especially women, we tend to want to lessen the blow by building them up and sugarcoating things and then telling them what's going on. But when you start with this, honey, you're amazing and I love you and you are my world and I just can't do life without you. You've given them 4 objectives at this point, 4 things to think about. And then you want to say, but you do. Okay, so if they've made it past the 4 things, because we tend to say, you're loving, you're kind, you're this, we've built them up, and now we're going to go, phoom. But all they're getting is the loving and kind part. They're not thinking about the issues that we have to go forward in our relationship. So remember a few points during the conversation. Stephanie's right, it makes a huge difference in how you communicate. So, also, pointing blank. When you say to them, you do, you are, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. When you do this, okay, you are now pointing blank. So you've already got somebody who is feeling less, they feel this way. This is just a sign of PTSD. We can take it for what it is. We can't change that. We will over time by uplifting them, and they will gain trust in us and it will become different. But when you have an issue and you're talking about the issue, you need to say, I feel, sweetie, I feel like this when you do this. Okay? I feel, so you're taking ownership for how you feel. I feel like this when you do this. Carl, look, I am overwhelmed. Okay, so now I have taken this on me. Carl, I'm overwhelmed. I need you to do this and this. Okay, so you see how it changes? Instead of going into him and saying, frustrated, angry because I'm overwhelmed, and saying, I'm done. You need to do. Look at the difference in the tone. Honey, I am overwhelmed. I need you to do this and this so I don't feel so overwhelmed. Now they have a mission. Versus, you're saying the exact same thing, but you're saying it in a different tone. It's the I feel overwhelmed. I need you to do this and this so I don't feel so overwhelmed. That little bit of verbiage change in the way you approach makes a huge difference. You're not making them feel like a failure because they're not. They already feel that way in their head. You want mission driven, 2 objectives, 3 objectives, and that it makes you feel. They may not be aware of how you feel. Remember, they're programmed to not give a squat about feelings. They're programmed to not give a squat about feelings. It is very concise. It is very, do you really think that when they're in a combat situation, they're going to come in and say, look, your objective is to take out this and this. Oh, is it going to upset you if you might have to kill somebody along the way? They don't give them that option. So, about their feelings. So, that feeling comes out. It helps in the communication. And you're going to find that when you start talking like this and communicating like this, they're going to open up more and more and more. Maybe not about the specific events, but they're going to open up more and more about how they feel. And that is key to getting into this healthy, happy relationship. The other thing that I hear all the time, I did it, I was guilty of it, he's actually the one who stopped me from doing it, is the walking on eggshells. When you walk on eggshells and you don't say what's bothering you, of course, communicate it in the right way, but when you walk on eggshells and you let things go and things fester up inside of us, and our bubble now has this big ugly zit that just needs to be squished, and then it comes out like an explosion, right? Because you know that's how I talk. It's like vomit coming out, right? When you do that, you are creating a seed of doubt. Okay? Trust is a big issue with our veteran. So when they've done something that has irritated you or agitated you, or when they don't do something that needs to be done, and you're like, it's okay, I got it, right? And because you don't want to create a conflict, it's okay, I've got it. Now this resentment is building up in you, and you're being dishonest. Because when you finally get to a point where you're exploding, you know, me and my, then you're throwing up all these things that you told them was okay in the beginning if they didn't do it. So now where's the trust? You've got to be able, they're either going to get mad or they're not. But I'm going to tell you, you are much better for them to get mad over something little that you say in a controlled environment without the stuff. Okay? You have to feel, you can't have the junk. You gotta have the trust. Sophia goes, this is so needed. I just found out my oldest daughter has lupus. I was trying to be upbeat, but my gentle giant felt it and came in the room with his arms open and said, come here. I was shocked because he doesn't feel. But he is feeling, Sophia, because you love him. I also was just diagnosed with lupus this year, and it's tough. So if you need me, text me, whatever. Been a heck of a journey. I'm learning a lot. So I'll just throw that out there. Right? And Carl is seeing that in me. He is coming to me now that I've learned to communicate my feelings. Now that I've done that, he is learning to show empathy. Remember, empathy is gone in them for most of them. It is trained out of them. It is programmed out of them in most cases. So if you don't tell them how you feel, if you don't communicate that you're sad, if you don't communicate, like in Sophia's case, that she is hurt and angry and scared that her daughter has lupus, and she doesn't communicate that, yeah, you can't be in the dump all the time about it, but when you get that initial thing, you get scared. If you don't communicate that, and then you don't understand why they're not loving on you and not showing you empathy, how are they supposed to do that if you don't tell them? Now, initially, you may not get the response you want. Initially, when we first went through this, when I got the diagnosis, right, when I got that, when we first got that diagnosis, I was mad, I was angry, I was scared, okay? And so when Carl and I were first talking about it, he would say things to me like, suck it up, Buttercup. It's okay, you got this. You know, I didn't want the Army, ruck it on and let's go, ruck up and let's go. I didn't want that. I wanted somebody to wrap their arms around me and just let me cry, okay? But because we started to talk, and initially he said, we got this, it's okay. I wanted just to cry because it was me and that was what I wanted to do. And so when I started to communicate with him after everybody kind of settled down, that I was afraid and I was scared and I didn't know if I could do this. And it forever changed my world. You know, no more ambulance, no more this, no more that. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I cried. And at that point, he put his arms around me and he let me cry and he says, we've got this. Your lupus didn't change you. So that only came from not walking on the eggshells. Okay? They don't know how you feel if you don't tell them. We don't know how they feel if they don't tell us. When Carl gets in a space now, I don't have to rely on the music he's listening to tell me he's in a space. He now says, I'm in a place. I need to unwind. I'm in this. I need to. He may not tell me everything that's going on in his head, but he communicates to me that he's in this space. That is trust. That is love. That is communication. And when we do it in a controlled environment where we're not in an argument, we become respectful. When I get angry and I vomit out everything that's going on in me, and then of course I vomit out everything that he's ever done wrong in his entire life, and I vomit out more daggers, there's no respect there. There's zero respect there. So how do I expect to get respect back if I'm not giving it to him to begin with? And then everybody would say, well, he's not respecting me. Well, no shit, somebody's got to stop. Learn respect. Be careful in how you communicate that you're not demasculating them. Be super careful in when you communicate that you don't demasculate them. I've got this. Okay, well, maybe they want to have that. And when you get to the point where you say, you know what, you don't need to do this, I've got this, and you don't need to do that, I've got that, and you don't need to do this, I've got that. And what happens, they feel worthless, number one. You're taking more on your plate than you can handle. All right, so your plate is so full, it's now dripping all over the floor. You're showing them that you don't trust them, and you've demasculated them. So realize that way we communicate sets that tone. And it is very tough to understand that. You know, there are days that I just need a hug. You know, the whole thing with what happened with Nakia in Texas. When I got done, I needed a hug. Well, the good thing is because we've communicated so much lately about our feelings, he gave it to me without asking. Okay, well, the other night I went to bed and I was exhausted and I just wanted his arms around me for 5 minutes because the two of us in a bed is like a heater of massive proportion. And he was doing something and came to bed a little later, and I made some smart ass comment like, well, if you would have waited 10 more minutes, I would have already been asleep. Okay? When what I wanted to say was, hey, honey, will you just wrap your arms around me for 5 minutes? But what did I do? I made some smart ass comment. So how willing do you think he's going to be to wrap his arms around me when I made some smart ass comment? He isn't a mind reader. He didn't know that I was in that place. They don't read minds. I don't read his mind. He doesn't read my mind. So being able to communicate where he can tell me, hey, I'm in a spot, or me to be able to communicate with him, hey, hon, can you just wrap your arms around me? I just need to feel safe for a few minutes. When you do that, your relationship grows because you're telling each other what your needs are. Don't expect people to figure it out. That's how you grow a healthy relationship. That's how the gentle giant put down his walls and took somebody on an amazing Valentine's Day, because they've worked on communication. She's not demasculating him. She uplifts him. She listens to him, because we've read all of her posts, right? And it creates a problem. We make the comment and then we get mad because they don't do the expectation we want. And expectations kill relationships. Absolutely. Because remember, Go way back to what we talked about last month. We all have a right to say no. We all have a right to say, I can't do this. When you set an expectation and it's not something they can do at that moment, they have that right to say no. They have that right not to do it, just like we do. So when we're talking about the rights we have and the way we need to communicate, we can convey that back to them. But when we start communicating healthy and we see that it's starting to turn, you can do the Nakia thing and put your hand and say, stop. In a tone like this, stop. We need to take a break, whatever works for y'all, because sometimes taking a break doesn't work. Can we lower the tone? And what I found interesting is that when we started doing this, I tend to get uptight, so my voice gets louder and louder and louder, and now Carl's coming to me and saying, stop. Let's sit down and talk like adults. And that was a massive breakthrough. Stop. Let's sit down and talk like adults. And so when we did that, our communication is so much better and our relationship is so much better. Do we still disagree? Absolutely. Are there still days I want to pop his head off? Absolutely, because I'm sure there's days he wants to pop mine off too. But that's a relationship. That happens in every relationship. So it is important, and this is where we start to divide up what are relationship issues and what are PTSD. PTSD is a moment. Sometimes they cycle and they're a little more on edge. But when you look at it, most of the issues in our relationship don't come from the PTSD. They're relationship issues that we have allowed, or they have allowed, or together we have allowed the PTSD to control the relationship. Because we don't want them to explode, so we walk on eggshells. And when you do that, you're not communicating and you're not creating a sense of trust. When we walk on eggshells, you're not communicating and you're not having a sense of trust. They don't read minds and they need to trust. And then when we get to the point we're yelling, we've lost all respect. Those are the key factors. So when we do this, communication is key. Find what works. When I tell people who start out and they say, I feel like I'm drowning, I feel like we are just, where do I start? Because a lot of people are in the starting place. And I don't care if you've been in your relationship with your veteran 1 day, 6 months, 5 years, 20 years. When it's out of control, you need to find a starting place. And that starting place is simply making that list. Make the list. Make the list of the things you feel that need to change. Make that list and be specific. Not you don't listen to me. No man listens. That's insane. You don't listen to me when. I feel disrespected when. Those things. Very specific list. When we argue, you do this. Again, very specific list. You realize that I may work from home, and I do, that I may work from home, but from this time to this time, I'm at work and I can't just drop everything I'm doing for you or the kids or anybody else. I have to have my time and my space respected. Okay? You have to write that down on your list and then prioritize it and then talk about it one thing at a time or 2 things at a time, and you will find that list will go away. But In return, you have to ask them if you're going to go one issue, you have to ask them for one issue. What is one thing I do that creates a problem with you or makes you feel, or whatever your verbiage wants to be, sets you off? What's one thing I can do to relieve your stress? One. Go one for one. Because when you do that, you're going to make them feel respected. If you go in and attack, where's that respect? Okay? Where's that respect? Start with your list, because then you're going in with a clear thought. Just take your brain for a minute. You know, we talked about how they're programmed. Take your brain for a minute and program it into a military operation. You have a mission. Your mission: healthy, happy, loving relationship. What are your objectives to get there? If communication is your biggest objective, write it. How are you going to fix the communication? Now you've got a plan, because when you start talking all over everywhere, you get off the task, off the mission. Carl is really good at, if we're arguing over this or we're having a discussion over this one thing, and then all of a sudden I bring all these pieces to the thing. Because, girl, let me tell you, when I argue, I will find every skeleton in the closet and rattle it to bring out more. Okay, so my one issue has now become 50 issues because I dragged every skeleton out of that closet. So find your one, make it mission directed to them. Now you're talking to them on a level that they've been programmed to understand. It's like, if you're going to adopt a child from another country, you're going to at least learn to say I love you in their language. I mean, that's just kind of the way it works. So if you're going to adopt somebody who speaks another language, you're going to at least be able to pick up your kid and say I love you in the language they understand. So let's communicate with our veteran in a language they understand. I didn't tell you, if you get the kid, that you got to learn to speak Mandarin. And I'm not asking you to learn to speak military and combat lingo. But what I am saying is, if this is the way they understand it, let's start talking in a way they kind of get it, and then it all becomes one conversation in one language. I think Carl does more than anything that irritates me is he speaks at least 3 languages fluently. We can get into it. He'll start in English, it'll flip to German or Spanish, and it's all in the same sentence, and it drives me insane because I feel like he's talking about me. You know, like when you go to the nail salon and the little ladies are speaking in wherever they're from. If you go to one that is Vietnamese driven, they're all speaking in that, and you inevitably feel like they're talking about you. That's what happens when we start talking in circles, and when we don't give clear missions, and when we don't give clear directives, and when we sugarcoat things. We are speaking another language to somebody who's been programmed objective 1, 2, and maybe 3. So make your strategy mission driven. It works. It works. That's how you build the loving, lasting relationship with communication. Yeah, they are mission driven. And that's where we are. Oh yeah, and they probably are talking about me too, Stephanie. When the little nail people, they'd be like, ooh, she got some nasty feet when I get my little pedicure done. Yeah, and you know that when you're sitting in there and it's just like ridiculous. But just remember mission driven when we communicate. Let's talk to them where they get it. And again, It's like, well, I try and he's not. Well, I got that and I try and he's not too, but we eventually find a way that works. I can only speak to you about what I know. I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist. I can just tell you what I know. What I live by. You know, that's all I can do. I can't tell you some expert advice because I don't think there is an expert in this. Every veteran is different. All of us are different. PTSD is vastly different. It is not a one size fits all deal. It is vastly different. And all of the pieces have to come together to find what works for you. Use the analogy of a vehicle. You know, all cars, other than Tesla, have to have gas, and they have to have a way to form combustion, and they have to have oil, and they have to have transmission fluid. Do you know there's like 8 different kinds of transmission fluid? Okay, 8 different kinds of transmission fluid. Brake lights. There are like 15 different brake light bulbs. There are like 19 different kinds of air filters at least, or oil filters. The bottom line is they're all still a car, or they're all still a vehicle. You have to find the filter that fits and that works. Same concept in our relationships with our veterans. We all have a common goal. It's a relationship, and they're a veteran, and there's us, and they have PTSD, and we want it to work. But make sure you're using the right oil filter and the right brake fluid and the right brake lights, because you can have all these pieces and drop them on the table, and if none of them fit, your vehicle's not going to work. And that's what happens in our relationships. You take all of this information, you utilize the basics. This is how their brain works. This is how I can talk to them. They understand 2 or 3 things. But what may be my number one priority may not be yours. You know, I don't live in Stephanie's world with 2 kids that are playing ball all the time. That woman just is amazing, because I don't know how the heck she does it. That doesn't affect me the same way. So I have to find the communication with Carl that works for the issues for him and I. She's got a whole different set. Hey, can you pick up my kid at ball practice? You know, what, our kid at ball practice, can you take them? Can you do this? I mean, she's got a lot on her plate. She works full time from home. I mean, there's a lot on her plate. So her issues are not the same as mine. Her veteran may respond differently, but the bottom line is still, we've all got to have the oil and the oil filter and the gasoline and the things that make the vehicle run. We just have to find the right ones that fit. And that's what we got to do in our relationships when it comes to communicating. Practice makes perfect. You got to try. There were a lot of things that we failed at trying to get to where we could communicate. But failure to me, I mean, how many times did Thomas Edison make a light bulb before it worked? So everybody is unique and everybody is different, and all of our relationships are different. Finding the right pieces to go together, the premise is still the same. And that's what happens when we go to communicate. Loving, lasting relationships are built on good communication, trust, and respect. And when we walk on those eggshells and don't tell them how we feel, we have taken trust right out of the way. We've also stopped communicating, and we've also stopped respecting them by demasculating them. Okay? And she's right. Learning the veterans' language and communication styles means a lot to them as well, because they do. They respect and they understand that, because you're not asking them to speak a language they don't get. And Carl starts speaking to me in German, I don't understand it, and it frustrates me. So learn to speak veteran. It's a whole language all by itself. Veteranese or something. I don't know what we're going to call it, but we're going to call it something. That's what happens. So I want y'all just to think about that, and it's personal. So I have a couple other things real quick I want to touch base on. I have not talked to Nakia this morning. That whole situation in Texas is just ugly. Um, but I will talk to her again, and I'll post an update when I speak to her. When I last spoke to her, she was warm and they were safe. But the town that she's in Wichita Falls, is going to be a mess. All the major water lines that feed the water systems have all now frozen and cracked. So it is not a good situation where she is. So please keep her and Richard in your thoughts and prayers. Behind the Service Podcast is doing coffee, conversation, and collaboration at 10 o'clock. If you want to join that, that's a little Zoom thing. They have that on their website. Got a phone call last night from one of my dearest friends, Jeannie Letts, and can I just tell you that she read a book. It is now available. I just ordered it. I'm so excited. And I posted the link in the stuff, but her child committed suicide. It's called pharmaceutical overdose, and it was from drugs from the veteran that the VA gave. So her book is now out. It is available on Amazon as well. Her story is amazing. She has a wall of 8 by 10 pictures of veterans who have committed suicide and their stories. And as of, when I talked to her last night, that wall is over 100 feet long. That wall is over 100 feet long of veterans committing suicide. So her book is out there. The link is on our page. I know that in the group I put a thing about resources. If y'all know resources that can help each other, go down under the comments and you'll see like the headings. Copy and paste the link to something you have found. There's a lot of stuff on there that we're adding all the time. Like I know I've added ketamine therapy. Not doesn't mean we're endorsing it. We're just putting that out there. We are totally putting out that. Yeah, Jeannie Letts' story is horrific. And I'll just give you the quick rundown. Johnny went to the VA. He had already told his mom to lock up the guns. He was suicidal. He went to the VA, asked for help, told them about the guns, and literally in his notes from the doctor it said that he was well kept. That he was well kept. In his notes it also said, do not ever give Johnny Letts Klonopin, and they did. And right after that they gave him opioids for pain. And he committed suicide. And his younger brother found him, Justin. And 18 months later, his younger brother also committed suicide from finding Johnny. So, Jeannie has lost 2 sons. 2. And she's made it her mission to never, ever, ever let anybody else die alone. It is her mission to stop veteran suicide, and she's doing an amazing job. So her link under that resources, if you go down, you'll see Jeannie's book. It's on Amazon. I hope you'll be here Friday. I'm so excited. I've talked to her. She's been writing it. She's an amazing woman, and how she goes on, I cannot even begin to imagine. But she is a very dear friend of mine. She created Buddy Up, and we're going to work on that too, starting Buddy Up chapters to help her create Buddy Up throughout the United States, and that's another project we'll get into next month. Anyway, I've gone over, I know, as usual, but this has been an amazing walking in my shoes. Y'all are an amazing community of love and friendship, and just some of the greatest resources available is y'all's love and support to watch us come together and just embrace Nakia has been amazing, and our family as we just lift each other up. And I look at some of the posts and some of the things that people are asking for help, and we lift them up. We wrap our arms around them as a family and just lift each other up. Don't forget to Let's Talk Thursday night. Got a message, actually was on his page, from Boone Cutler. We think Boone's going to pop in to talk about FPL, functional personal lifestyle. So get your questions ready. If he has it in his schedule to pop in, he is another amazing source. Just changed the world. So I'm Stacy. This has been Walking My Shoes. We are loving my veteran. Y'all have a blessed day. Stephanie will be on later tonight, as her schedule allows, to talk about self-help, because we enjoy those every time she talks about it. I learn something new every day. Y'all have a blessed day. Bye.